Welcome to Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group. I can't tell you how much fun we're going to have today with Scott Giroux here. Scott is a close friend of mine. We've met through mutual connections and got to know each other over the years at various conferences and had great conversations. We also have a little bit of a rivalry about our favorite hockey teams. So, Scott, thank you for coming. But even more so, I'm really excited about this topic, right? And Scott has a very, very cool perspective on this. It's navigating the nuances, mastering supplier management in the contingent workforce arena. And Scott has over 25 years of industry experience, both in the staffing side, managing large operations on the MSP side, and managing supply chains for large programs. And actually, we laughed about it, but he actually started in the industry with a staffing slash MSP program, master vendor program, qualifying sub-suppliers. So who better to have a conversation about this is Scott Giroux. So thank you so much, Scott, for taking time out of your day today and joining us on this topic.
And just real quick, Jeff, one, I mean, my smile actually just shows how infectious the topic in this conversation is. So, thanks for having me. And two, for those of you who have been on calls, and Jeff, I don't know if we have or haven't, but I get goosebump moments, right? And that was a goosebump moment, just the excitement, the talking about this particular topic, taking it full circle in 26 years. And I can see myself at a desk qualifying vendors, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But you'll see my passion come through about this topic, right? So.
No, and it's really important one too, right? So, managing your supply chain in a program, or if you're an MSP program lead or, master vendor, having the right supplier mix, the right way of working with them to make it a more trusted, smooth process is so important to getting, once again, and we joked about it, Scott, it's about getting this person to this job as quickly as possible and with as less friction, and keeping them happy in those roles as well. And it's so important to have great relationships with your supply chain and managing it correctly. So, let's set the stage here, right? Like you said, and we joked about, but 26 years ago, you were working with building out and qualifying suppliers to work in a program. And we're now 26 years later.
Right.
Talk about some of the changes, some of the trends around how working with a supply chain has changed, and some of the trends we're seeing go forward, and how it's impacting programs and how suppliers should work with programs.
Yeah. And again, fun topic. And to reminisce, as I was saying earlier, and you and I were chatting just a few minutes ago about, are things really different today, right? Is it really just the same thing with a little bit of a difference, right? And I can picture myself at a desk, right, in a big corporate office, and my job was to qualify vendors, and that qualification was negotiating contracts and collecting insurance certificates and reviewing their financials to make sure that they're a qualified supplier, right, from a risk management compliance perspective. But it was still boxes you had to check to make sure that this is kind of a qualified supplier to support your program's clients. And I think about the relationship at that time, and I think we all need to always remember that it's a relationship business and industry, meaning we're all in this together to bring the talent to the client, right? And we can do that in a very relationship driven perspective. And I think about the needs of the program and the client, right? They were always, Scott, where are we at with this? Are they almost qualified? Did they turn in their paperwork? Like, we need them now. We need them in the program, in that sense of urgency. And here we are 26 years later talking about the importance of suppliers and supplier management in that that onboarding process. And I think one of the things, and love to get your perspective on this, is It's there are a range of perspectives, right? You might hear some program sponsors talk about the need for supplier optimization and have less suppliers, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a view and a perspective. And in my opinion, there's other views around more can be better, more can be easier. Are benefits to that. And I don't think it's a right or wrong answer, Jeff, in my opinion. I think it's about what's the right um, solution for your use case and in your business out there. And obviously from the prospect's perspective, we come from a more inclusive supplier side of things. And so there's a unique perspective there. But I'm actually going to tee it back to you for a minute. And how do you feel about the perspective of one side being supplier optimization and let's rationalize and narrow it down to the top three versus is there a universe in your mind that it could work where more is actually better out there?
Well, I think it's a balance, right? And I think
Mhm.
you were talking about this a little bit, but really there's no one size fits all solution.
Yeah,
And it's the balance of um, can I get the best price, the right worker at the best price at the right time, right?
sure.
And
Yeah,
some people think by consolidating through a smaller group, you're going to always get the best price because they're going to bid the price down for
right,
you. But
right.
in reality, I'm not sure that is the actual way it works in 2024
Right.
with, you know, the way supply chains are needed, that really they have to be flexible and go up and down with the business so that
Yeah,
there's a nice balance of I have needs and I can fulfill them quickly at the right price, right? With
yeah,
the right talent through that supplier network.
yeah,
Um, so I think it's really a nuance, and I think it has to be a living beast, not just done every 5 years where you do an RFP, get the lowest price, and these are my three vendors. And quite
yeah,
honestly, what ends up happening is it means those three vendors are, subcontracting to a hell of a lot of others when you need a
yeah,
higher supply volume. They end up subcontracting to a lot too, as opposed to saying, hey, listen, let's have this be a little bit flexible or dynamic where I have more needs, so I increase my supply chain to meet those needs. And I think
yeah,
that's maybe what is different from the check the box manual processes in the past
yeah,
was the nuances there, the understanding your needs better, and having better relationships with the supply chain to be honest with them, to accordion in and out based on the requirements, right? And then I know we're going to talk about in a little bit, but the
sure.
technology, right? Technology
Yeah,
has also enabled the the streamline of processes so you can deal with more a number of vendors with the same level of effort that in the past
yeah,
would have been manual processes. So
yeah.
it's interesting how all these dynamics are working, but I think there's no one size fits all for anyone, right? It's
Yep. You,
circumstantial.
you mentioned kind of the kind of the benefits and the accordion idea concept there. And I think one of the common constraints that we've faced as an industry is building a supply chain where we can accordion. And how do we remove some of the administrative effort in managing that supply chain, right? Whether it's, I mean, these are challenges everybody faces, right? Whether it's the onboarding side of things, right? And all of the documents and the compliance and the insurance certificates, how can we make that, more automated? The overhead management in managing suppliers, right? I mean, we have acted as a supplier in programs, and MSPs invest a lot in supplier partnerships and clients, right? Even self-managed programs, but that's all additional, administrative work. And then the distribution of requisitions and how do we make sure my managers know who's in and out and all that. And so I think we've all been challenged with kind of just the operational complexities over the years. And I think there's a lot of solutions out there that are helping make that a little bit easier for everybody too. So looking forward to talking through best practices there.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. And it's interesting you bring up best practice. That's my next question, right? So,
Yeah.
given your experience and seeing of different programs throughout your career, are there some kind of best practices in managing relationship with your suppliers and best practices when it comes to, that the number of suppliers and, is there some sort of consistency around the magic of working with your suppliers to optimize it for your needs, right?
Yeah.
Not optimize it like rationalize optimization
Yeah. Yeah.
knowledge, but just
Yeah.
knowing the right numbers, the balance, how to work with them. What are some of the common best practices you've seen?
Yeah, and I don't want this to roll right into that commercial idea, but those best practices are what we believe is being built into the solution that we're building out there a little bit, right? And I think that first is having an efficient onboarding process and helping our clients understand that there is a more streamlined way to engage with suppliers where you can still manage risk and onboard them in a very efficient process out there. When I think about best practices, I also think about our supplier partners experience change, right? There's turnover at times, and how can we potentially help them support their clients better throughout that time period, and how can we use technology to enable the suppliers to maximize what they're really good at, right? How do we make sure we get them the jobs that they're best at, right? So they don't have to, sift through the purple squirrels that they're not good at. And then how do we make sure we get the purple squirrels to the right suppliers, right? And how do we use technology, automation? You and I talked about algorithms and potentially AI more into the future out there. So I would just encourage folks to continue to think about that and to think about how do I get to the right jobs to the right people at the right time to get the right candidates, to fill that seat out there a bit. So I think it's a big topic, Jeff, and probably, I would look forward to hearing from others as well. But I think those are some of the best practices. We've got to automate that onboarding process. We got to get jobs to people as quickly as we can to get the, right candidates to the hiring managers out there.
Yeah, and the other side of it too, and we talked about it, it's a trust-based business, it's a relationship-based business.
You're
And
right.
I think, you know, building relationships with your supply chain is important in
Hmm.
order to optimize that and help them understand what you're trying to do. So as you're implementing technology or you're, implementing new policies, be very transparent in why you're doing them, how you're doing them, what's in it for them. Like you say, in some cases, just chasing every wreck isn't in the best interest of suppliers. So
Right.
being able to work with them to say, hey, listen, you're really good at this from the data we have had, plus knowing, going through a evaluation process, we're going to make sure you get the recs that you're really good at so you can close as much business with the least amount of effort versus here, we're just going to flood you with 1,000 recs of which you're only going to get 10% closed, but you're going to spend a lot of effort on.
Yep.
That's not
Yep.
profitable business, right?
Yeah, I think we can even take that one step further, Jeff. And I think this is where we're headed. From a technology perspective, not just to the supplier, but the right recruiters in the supplier, right? Because you can have suppliers that have recruiters that are good at industrial, and the supplier can have recruiters that are good at technology, and some that are good at accounting, right? So
Yeah.
really take it a step further, not just the supplier, but what are the recruiters really at and good at? And let's get them those jobs out there, right? And I think, there's and it's not optimization, it's efficiencies, right? We're doing the same thing, but how do we get the job to the recruiter that's going to work that job the fastest, right? So
No, it
just
makes
an
so much
exciting topic.
sense. And so I know we've touched on technology a little bit, right?
Yep. Yep.
But I think if you were to look back and saw the trends when we first started, you know, we were using paper and fax machines and folders, right?
And the
around
mail,
some of the
like
dates.
we'd FedEx packages or UPS packages back and forth to each other. Where's the signed contract?
Yes.
Sorry.
And so the role of technology, we've seen that change, drastically.
Yeah.
But I think we're on the cusp of even further change around how it's going to work in some of the things you said were best practices to
Yeah.
automate some of those things and use data to truly help with some of the ways we manage the supply community and our relationship and utilization of them in a program.
Yeah.
Talk to us about, some of the changes you've seen first, right?
Yeah.
To set
Yeah.
the stage, and then let's look a little bit forward thinking. And it's probably not a lot forward thinking, given some of the conversations that I've had with you and seeing where
Yeah.
things are going in the industry.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, I one that excites me the most, Jeff, is truly data analytics. It's the numbers, right? Literally let the numbers drive the story, right? Let the numbers tell the story. Let the data actually help you make those decisions, right? And look at it from a data perspective. And I think the world of real-time analytics is coming along in our industry. And I think we're going to see analytics play a much bigger role here in the very near future. And it's analytics that we're using today. So I think that's the biggest area that I've seen change, at least within our organization. And I see an opportunity to continue to change, with in the future. We're speaking with MSP partners every day now, right? And it's so exciting to see their investment in analytics over the years, right? They're spending a lot of time, energy, effort. The VMSs are doing the same thing, right? That are out there. And I think we're going to continue to become a more data-driven industry organization. And I don't know, looking forward to tell that story here and be a part of that journey with everybody.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know what year the movie was out, but I always think when you talk about data and success, driving success,
Yeah,
Moneyball comes to mind, right? Good
yeah,
old Billy
absolutely.
Bean and Brad Pitt movie. I don't even
Yeah.
know when it came out. Would have been what, late? Oh, it was
Oof.
released. I just looked it up, 2011, right? And
Okay. What do
how
we at? 13
utilizing
years.
data started to drive success. And it wasn't just the big name ball players in winning
Yeah.
championships, right? And so I think the application now that we have technology tracking more and more of the processes, the analytics of resumes,
Yep.
and to make matches, better matches. I think now data will be driving a lot of what we should be doing, right? As opposed to that gut feel like it
Oh.
always was in recruiting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And just a couple of additional threads around data, right? My dad taught me many years ago, and it isn't just specific to my dad, but we hear it all the time. Measure it and it will improve, right? Measure it real time, it's going to start improving real time, right? So I think the look back at quarterly business reviews, right? It's like, let's look at the data now and empower that side of it. And then when we think about data and analytics and my excitement around that, hockey alone, right? We don't have to get into the details there, but the analytics in hockey today is completely different than their 10 or 15 years ago as well, right? And all of us need to continue to embrace the analytics, let that tell the story so we can make better decisions, not just next year, but next week, next month, next quarter, and next year out there. So,
Except in hockey when it comes to the playoffs. Usually you can throw all the analytics out the window and the tough guy team has
yeah,
generally been winning. But anyway, that's a
yeah,
whole story.
yeah, and it's the analytics at the individual level, I guess I'm saying, right? The player analytics and the recruiter, the supplier, and anyways, you just struck a nerve with the excitement around analytics with me, right?
We'll
Like,
have to take the hockey
yeah,
talk offline.
yeah,
So,
another conversation.
there we've talked about it being very much a people business. The
Yep.
people we help recruit for our clients drive their business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's risk in not managing your supply chain properly, right?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
comes to mind a number of risks, but
Yeah.
not only a
Yeah.
compliance, but it's if you don't get the proper people in the right seats, the client's business is at risk as
Yeah.
well, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about
Yeah.
some of the major risks
Yeah.
and how you've seen organizations, help manage that risk either upfront, during the
Yeah.
process, or in reviewing it,
Yeah.
putting new policies in place.
Yeah, and I think the risk management element, it's an unfortunate, it's one of the necessary topics, right? Because we always need to be talking about it. It's not the fun topic. It's we don't like to what if, and we've all been a part of some unfortunate situations because of whatever which is managing to that risk. Um, how best to start without going too much down that plug-up side of things, but I think there's continued evolvement in technology, right? I mean, what you're doing, right, as an entrepreneur to help companies, mitigate risk, understand, make good decisions, good business decisions. I'm excited about what technology is continuing to enter into the industry. We're working with some partners within the industry right now talking about compliance, right? And maybe it's the afterthought when it's an audit side of things, right? But how do we make that an efficient process? What are the right things to kind of be looking, right? That's kind of the afterthought. There's the compliance side of it in the onboarding of candidates, right? And in looking at technologies, not just from an IC perspective, but even the EOR side of things, right? What are all the things that they need to be doing? Actually, ICs and W2 employees out there as well. But I think there's a role for technology to continue to improve, that risk side of things. I don't know. Those are just my initial thoughts on it.
Yeah, for sure. And I
Yeah,
think it starts with almost due diligence of your vendor community, right?
yeah, yeah,
And so, when you do that vendor evaluation, there's the check boxes, but then there's the understanding of how they do things. Are they
yeah. The
financially
execution.
viable, right?
Yeah,
How are their processes internally to ensure they're compliant so that we're
yeah,
compliant with the client organization hiring people through this agency? Because,
yep,
unfortunately, how it works is the deepest pockets get named in the lawsuit and they go after. Then the middleman who kind of
yeah,
gave that
yeah,
person and said they're compliant, right?
yeah.
Or, are okay, their name isn't in the headlines typically,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
And so having the due diligence front and the supplier is often a good thing. And technology can help with that. Proper policies, proper due diligence up front is important. And
Sure.
then, like you say, managing it throughout, and there's technology to manage the processes throughout to actually streamline some of the
Help
compliance
it.
processes
Yeah. Yeah.
as you hire workers as well, right?
You spoke about the proper protocols and policies, and I think one of the examples that clients and MSPs maybe wrestle with a little bit is the whole subcontracting. Do you
Yes.
allow your suppliers to subcontract, right? Well, I think that oftentimes is designed to mitigate risk, right? So that it doesn't get too deep out there. I'll flip that coin. I'm really good at playing both sides of the argument, right? The flip side of that is you have a lot of suppliers out there who have access to a lot of talent that maybe don't know about those clients and those jobs. So how do we create an ecosystem that mitigates risk, but yet also allows that talent to get to the hiring managers so everybody wins, kind of an idea. So there's a balance there, and I think there's pros and cons to what your policies and procedures are at a client and managing to that. So
Oh, for sure. And quite honestly, I don't know if you've seen it, but I've seen it quite a bit that the contract says you can't do something, right? But the supplier who signed that contract does it anyways underneath.
yeah.
So, the whole
Yeah.
subcontracting, you will not subcontract, sure,
Sure. Yeah.
right? If I need a body and I can't find the body, I'm going to subcontract it to a recruiter that found it for me and
Yeah.
still place it with you. I'm going to hire an IC place it
Yeah.
and say,
Yeah.
oh, it's not a subcontractor.
Yeah.
So, getting past what you believe they're doing because it's in the contract is really important, and doing your due diligence, because at the end of the day, you will be named in the lawsuit, and your lack of due
Yeah.
diligence on your vendor community and their lack of due diligence in process and or how they're paying their people will reflect
Yep.
on you, right?
Yeah.
As the client.
100%. And so many thoughts went through my head as you said that, right? And I believe that 95% of those in this industry are doing the right thing and playing by the rules and trying to do it the right way, right? And unfortunately, there is some scope creep on people that maybe jeopardize that a little bit, right? And it's those unfortunate situations, and that's where I'm a strong believer in auditing and compliance certification and really making sure the due diligence is being done to keep everybody on their toes. So I'm a believer in that aspect of it. Yep.
So, I think we could probably talk for another hour or two on this
Yes, we
topic,
could.
and it goes and weaves, bobs and weaves, and
Yeah.
and then we'll always put some hockey talk in between us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but the future, right? So, supplier management, compliance, um, having the right mix of suppliers is a topic that is not going to go away, right?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
with the talent shortages we even face, as kind of the economy seems to have slowed a little bit, we still face the talent shortages. As we
Yep.
ramp back up, I think it's going to exaggerate the talent shortages, because a lot of people, let's call it the baby boom generation and behind it, are leaving the workforce. And so those talent shortages are going to remain. It's important to have really good supplier management and a supply chain that works for you.
Yeah.
What should an organization be doing to always be on the leading edge, right? And thinking about what's next, and upgrading how they manage their supply chain, or upgrading their supply chain in general. Like, what are you
Yeah.
seeing, and what would you say? How does an organization prepare for what's next, right? And
Yeah. Great question, right? And the first thing that comes to mind for me is encouraging those that manage the supply chain to really get engaged with what the supplier community, right? Whether it's your MSP partners or other MSPs or technology providers, it's changing and it's happening real time, right? Like there is definitely change, right? And encourage everybody to continue to have um, at least allow the opportunity for that discussion to watch supplier management evolve from a best practices. Just because we always did it that way doesn't mean it's the best way to keep doing it forward, right? And there's a lot of us that have been in this industry, and it's like, well, we've always done it that way. Well, does that mean it's the best way to keep doing it going forward? So I would encourage those to continue to have a conversation around it. The other aspect of it, Jeff, that I think is important is, kind of how we started this conversation, is there isn't a one size fits all answer. For somebody who's very passionate and has a perspective on something, I bet there's also somebody out there that has a counter argument and a different perspective. And, let's have that conversation. Let's have that dialogue around those types of things. We're all going to continue to be faced with not just the talent shortages of getting the talent to our clients. We're going to continue to face our own internal challenges in terms of cost, access to talent and technology within our organizations, right? And so I think it's just going to continue to evolve, and let's keep challenging ourselves in just because it was that model, does it always have to fit in that type of a model out there? So that's what I encourage people to do to prepare, is watch more of Jeff's podcasts, have more dialogue about what these people are doing to manage to that, right? Bring that client community together for their best practices, right? I know there's groups along those lines, and I don't know, I'm excited about where we're at, and I'm excited about what's coming in the near future, not just for what we're seeing in building in our organization, but what for others are doing out there as well. It's an exciting time to be looking at supplier management.
Yeah, that curiosity, and although is so important. And even though, let's say, you're not hiring right now, you should always be looking outbound and understanding what's changing in the market and engaging with
Yeah.
people to understand what's new, either be it new suppliers, new vendor management tools, etc. Right? Like, it's so important to always be curious and keep your pulse on what's happening,
Yeah.
even if you
Like,
aren't hiring right now, right?
yeah, you saw me like get excited when you said something there, right? It's not just about technology. There's a lot of new suppliers coming into the space as well, right? And maybe they're independents. Maybe they got tired of working at a XYZ staffing firm and they want to go out on their own as well. I mean, there's a different workforce even within our industry, right? And not everything, is going to fit inside that box all the time. And how are we as an industry going to manage to that, right? And make it efficient for the worker to get to the client.
Awesome.
Super passionate about this.
Scott, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day
Me as
to
well,
have a
Jeff.
great conversation. So
Good to see you.
again, I love the topic. I think
Yep.
there's more to be said on it, and it's going to continue to evolve, but thank you for your insight.
Thanks, buddy. Good to see you. Take care.